Everybody wants fast results, but fast results doesn't build empires. So today we're going to be talking about scaling your business. And when you're scaling a business, like a coaching business or your expert business, it is the lack of what we call the growth literacy gap that prevents you from moving as fast as you can. So I'm going to go through specifically what that is, and then what are the three big mistakes that I've seen over the last 10 years and hundreds of clients I've worked with, what that really looks like, especially through the dozens of specific ad agency clients that we've been able to work with. This is key because the bigger the companies that I see that are really making billions, these are the people that have the longest time horizons for when they want to see a profit. So right now there is a bidding war between Netflix and Paramount to be able to acquire Warner Brothers. And Netflix has over 80 billion on the table. Paramount has over 100 billion on the table. So I'm doing some research and I'm like, let me see, like, how do they plan on getting their money back, right? And how long is it actually going to take for them to get their money back when you make an investment like that? So when I looked at the different ways and how long it's going to take, when you add up the numbers, it is going to take them about a decade. So imagine putting in a dollar now and not even in breaking even in 10 years. And then also all of the different ways they're going to be able to multiply that back once they get the ROI. When you think about subscriptions, when you think about licensing, when you think about movies, when you think about all of the different things that they could do with the shows and the characters and spinoffs, right? Two of the biggest shows they got, two of the biggest, they got Harry Potter. Warner Brothers has Mission Impossible. Imagine, let's say if Netflix acquired it, them being able to add all of the add their entire library to the Netflix, right? And let's just say that improves their subscribership by 10 million. So imagine $10 a month times 10 million. That's 100 million a month. They're thinking long term, right? They didn't catch up to the 80 billion they invested yet, but that's just one area. So that's really what today is about, is the ability to be patient and overcome what we call the growth literacy gap. Now, specifically, that's more along the lines of, okay, you invest, let's say, in ads today, and you want to be able to get a return on your investment, right? So you get excited, we get this dopamine hit in our brain, and it's like, okay, I'm putting down $100 a day. And 2 days pass and you're like, I didn't monetize yet. Again, you got to be thinking long term. You can monetize fast, but you have to have the expectation that you may not. And you have to be willing, especially when it comes to ads, you have to be willing to invest for the long term, because there's certain things that need to happen. There's certain data that we need to see. And there's certain assumptions that we're making when we're running ads where, to be honest, we don't really know if those assumptions are correct yet. So it's going to take time. Now, good part about it is you're not going to have to wait 10 years like Netflix, right? But at the same time, you still gonna have to have some level of patience, right? Even if it's a few weeks, even if it's a few months. I've specifically ran campaigns there. I didn't really see an ROI on it until maybe 3 months down the road, but I was getting closer to it. I paid a little bit more in the cost per lead than I wanted. It cost me, the cost per acquisition was a little bit more than I wanted. But over time, I was able to tweak it and do some things that allowed me to be able to get a positive ROI. And those are part of the three mistakes that we're talking about. So the first mistake I hear is, my niche is already clear. So you might be like, yo, all right, Terrell, I understand what you're saying, but I've been doing this already. I'm already making X amount of dollars per month. I'm already full time. I'm already doing good. I'm already on a nice path. I'm very clear on what my niche is. Are you really though? Because there is a there's a false assumption that because you have an idea of who you're helping and because you've already been making money, you think your niche is clear. But your niche is not really clear until you can put out a message. And really, when you put out if you put out a message that's so good and that's so compelling, theoretically, you should be able to get the best clients for the lowest cost per lead. When you really think about it, if you hit a pain point that's so strong because you understand your audience so clear that you get a decent cost per lead, and it could be different depending on what niche or what industry you're in, but you're able to monetize from the front end, meaning you're able to get a low cost per lead, low cost per acquisition, right? Where you're getting an ROI, and you're able to enroll your ideal clients, specifically through the sales process, and it's smooth like butter the entire pipeline. Then if that is true, then you shouldn't have any issues. But most of the time, what I see is that you say I'm clear on my niche, but you're not really hitting the pain points that you think you're hitting, and it's evident in response to the ads, right? Or there's certain psychological factors they're missing, or because your audience is so wide or various that you're trying to hit pain points in different industries or different niches because you don't want to leave any money off the table. And I've seen this happen from 7-figure brands, right? Where they offering too much, they doing too much, they making money, but they still doing too much, right? So you really got to get clear on the niche that you want. Even if you're helping multiple niches, and this is key, even if you're helping multiple niches, the messaging has to be clear for one specific niche. You might say, I work in this industry. You might say, yo, I help experts and I help people in professional services and I help lawyers, doctors, I help people brick and mortar. Whoever, right? And that's if you business specifically. You might not even be in that niche, but you can tighten up the messaging specifically, and when you do that, it'll be more attractive. I did this with one of our clients. We had a guy, came to me and he was like, all right, hey, I want to start, running these advertisements, and he was previously already helping people who had fears. He was like, man, I'm really good with helping people overcome fears. Okay, I'm like, okay, great. And I say, what type of fears? And he kind of looks at me. He's like, well, I help people with any type of fear. And I said, okay. I said, I understand that, but do you realize all of the type of fears and phobias that people have? He said, yeah, but my strategies work for everybody. I said, okay, I know it does. But I said, specifically for the marketing though, like us putting out an advertising message is not going to be as effective putting out an ad for all types of fears versus you saying, okay, this particular type of fear. So I persuaded him and said, all right, let's choose one. And I said, well, what got you into this? He said, it's the fear of public speaking. I said, there you go. So he told me a story, whatever. I said, that's what we're going to focus on. We changed the advertising, and now, boom, soon as we changed the advertising, he got in I don't know, maybe it might have been within 2 months. He got 515 leads. 515 within a few months. And all we did was niche down a little bit more. Instead of just saying fear, we said specifically the fear of public speaking. So that's the first thing, is are you really dialing down your niche as much as you can? Second mistake I hear is that I just need more leads. I just need to get more leads, right? And look, I have an ads agency. I'm the guy. I would love you to get more leads. You know what I mean? I know more leads ultimately means more money. But just because I'm running your entire growth acquisition system, because my goal is not just to run ads for you. Somebody asked me about this the other day, and it was like, hey, well, why can't I just hire a virtual assistant? And I said, you can. I said, but the difference between me and a virtual assistant is that I'm taking over your entire growth acquisition system. I'm not just setting something up and you're paying me hourly and just to do one little task and then I'm done. You know what I mean? So I've been in the industry for the last 10 years, in the coaching expert online marketing industry for the last decade. I've not only set up these systems, but I was already building these from click to close for my own company. And then years later, I started doing it for other businesses. And in knowing every step of the process. And my whole goal at the end of the day is to make you more money. That's what my goal is, right? You hire somebody to do a task management, they're not putting together systems, right? You get a VA that's gonna come in, they're gonna follow whatever you have in place. When you hire me, I'm coming in and I'm building a client acquisition system for you that's optimized the entire way through so you can make more money. My goal is to make you more money. That's what the goal is. So I mentioned that because I can easily just run ads for you and say get more leads, but the big thing is not just about getting more leads. I want to make sure that your pipeline is not the only thing that is not leaking, right? You don't want a leaky pipe. So your leaky pipe comes down to, are we looking at every step of the process and seeing what could be fixed? Right? Because we can easily push more, like, if you're getting 100 qualified leads this month, okay, cool. We can spend more money. We could put more ad spend on it. And then you could get 200 leads, and whatever appointments you were getting, per week, now we could double it. That can easily be done. However, what we also need to pay attention to is, well, how many of those people are going from, okay, I just opted in, signed up, to booking an appointment? How many of those, what are we looking at from the people who are booking appointments to showing up? Like, how many of the people are actually making it through? And because of that, that's where the leaky pipeline is happening. So it's not necessarily just putting more leads through, but it's about making sure that we fix certain areas from click to close through the customer journey to make sure that, okay, when we turn up the budget, it's going to make sense. And that's going to take me to the third one. Third mistake is, I track enough to know what's working. Right? So here's the thing. Your lack of tracking is actually what's costing you more money. The lack of tracking, right? Because it's like, okay, well, you might be tracking a couple things. If you already running ads, you might be doing cost per lead. We kind of know that. If obviously you're looking at sales, how much sales you made. But there's so many metrics in between that you may not be tracking. And this kind of goes back to my previous point, is that if you don't really know what you're tracking, and that means you don't know what the leaks are at. If you don't know what the leaks are at, then how can you improve certain metrics? How do you know what thresholds you're supposed to hit? What baselines you're supposed to hit to know that your campaigns that you're spending these advertisements on is going to be profitable? So you want to be able to do that. I remember one of our clients, shout out to Coach Edward. He was one of the things that I realized after asking him some questions is that he wasn't really following up the way that he needed to follow up with the leads. So he's getting leads, he got people, but I figured out that, you're not really following up with the leads the way you're supposed to be doing it, right? We started looking at some of his numbers. I started asking about some of the metrics, and I said, your follow-up process hasn't been like that. So, so we made some changes. He started to follow up in a proper way and in a proper amount of time. The next month he made $60K in 30 days. Right? Not that the people didn't need it, they needed it, but because he wasn't efficient and effective in his follow-up, he was losing tens of thousands of dollars. Soon as we fixed the follow-up process, because we looked at the numbers, he made $60K in a month. So that's really what we're talking about, is that you got to really look at the numbers. So, we're tracking obviously sales, but I'm also tracking how many people are you offering. I also have them tracking how many people are showing up live. I also have how many people are booking, because then that's going to tell us what we need to fix. I'm also looking at how many people are booking through automation, because that's key too, because you can do certain things through automation. How many people are booking in general just through your normal follow-up, right? Obviously, how many people are signing up through the leads. We're looking at cost per lead, obviously, right? Like cost per acquisition. How much are you ultimately paying to get clients? So we're looking at these different areas, right? How many people are paying you in full? How many people are paying you portions or paying you in installments? How much cash collected are you getting? right? So there's how many conversations are you creating, or what is your speed to lead? So there's certain, and we have this all in a dashboard when we work with our folks. The whole idea behind it is making sure that you have a tracker so we know what's going on. Once we know what's going on, it makes it a lot easier to know what to fix. And then that's when we can go into your pipeline. We can fix the leaks. And then once those leaks are fixed, you'll start to see more of an ROI. Then we could turn up the faucet in order to be able to generate more revenue. All right. When I say turn up the faucet, that means bring more leads through. All right. So that's what it looks like. Now, everything I just mentioned is not something that's necessarily going to happen overnight. It's not necessarily going to happen in a week. Sometimes if you don't have certain metrics that you're tracking, we might have to just spend a few weeks or a month tracking just to see what's going on. There might be certain things that need to be fixed in the messaging or the pipeline or the follow-up. There might be certain automations we got to install in order to make sure that, okay, let's monitor what that looks like. So that's what the patience is. And that's one of the things that I took away when I'm looking at these big deals and these big acquisitions is that, they're willing to wait a decade to get an ROI, but when it hits and they realize, we making a billion a year, 2-3 billion a year, and it took them 10 years to break even, but now they making 2, 3, 4, 5 billion a year off this one acquisition. Just off this one function right here, this one company right here, this one subsidiary right here. So we got to think more long term. All right. So that's the whole idea behind this. If you like this, go ahead and like this video. Go ahead and subscribe to this video. And if it is, and if you do want to be able to explore what it will look like to bring us on as your growth acquisition partner in terms of everything that we do from click to close to be able to scale your business, and we work with a lot of different coaching and consulting businesses. If you want to do that, just go ahead and click the button below, and I'll see you.